Hello everyone, welcome to this video. In this video, I'd like to talk to you about how businesses can execute their strategy in a superior way. And with that, of course, how businesses can achieve competitive advantage. So at the very fundament of superior strategy execution lies the fact that organizations need to have the right distinctive capabilities. And having distinctive capabilities, first of all, starts with having a distinctive workforce. You need to have the right people, because the right people then will be able to do extraordinary things. And so how are you able to get the right people? First of all, you can get them from inside your company, right? You can invest in your own people through programs, through trainings, and this way you can actually build talent. And as people, of course, grow within your company will grow with these people. But sometimes you don't have the right people. Sometimes you don't have the right programs or trainings. In such a situation, you need to get people from outside of your company. So you need to recruit people, and after you recruit people, you need to retain them. So recruiting people, of course, is a matter of screening people, evaluating people, and of course, before all of this, starting with job posts, job offerings, in which of course you list competitive things, perks, compensation that's actually going to lure the right people to your company. Once you hire these people, you need to retain them, which basically boils down to you need to invest in them, you need to coach them, you need to challenge them, you need to compensate them for their performances, so that again they're going to stay in your company, grow with your company, and going to be a key asset of your superior strategy execution. So if you have a distinctive workforce, and of course after that comes the task of possessing distinctive resource and capabilities aside from the right workforce. And you know, having the right resource and capabilities, you can again achieve in different ways. First of all, you can develop your resource and capabilities internally. Think about research and development, think about experimentation, trial and error learning. You can ensure that certain tasks, certain activities, even after you're doing them for the first time, you can invest in these, you can improve them, right? And you can see what works and what doesn't work. And as these activities, of course, become more sustainable, more reliable, and as they really improve in terms of performance, they get to the level where you can call them a capability, being basically the capacity to actually execute your strategy in an extraordinary, in a superior manner. So if you cannot develop your capabilities internally, then you have to, of course, find an alternative to this. Basically, this can mean that you need to acquire resource and capabilities through a merger or through an acquisition. So you need to get it from outside your company, and one way of doing this is actually acquiring it. So sometimes an acquisition can be faster, it can sometimes even be cheaper, and with that it can sometimes be better than internally developing a resource or a capability. But the flip side of things is, of course, that an acquisition and the merger is quite risky. You don't know exactly what you're acquiring. You don't know actually what you're going to meet, what you're going to see, what you're going to uncover. And with that, sometimes a merger and an acquisition can take a long time because of all sorts of inefficiencies and all sorts of problems that may arise. And with that, it might be a very expensive process and a very bad process in terms of the quality that's going to come out of the acquisition and out of the merger. Resource and capabilities might not fit with each other, business units might not fit, people might not fit, and you might end up in a big mess. So if you don't want to acquire resource and capabilities, but you still cannot really develop these resource and capabilities internally because it simply doesn't work, because it's expensive, or because it takes too long, you can of course also access capabilities via collaborative partnerships, and the same thing counts for resources. So if you don't want to do something yourself, then you can ask somebody else to do it for you, which can basically boil down to you outsourcing certain activities to other partners. And this you can especially do if these activities are not really fundamental, are not really things that define you, but nevertheless are very important. Think about administration, think about certain features of the infrastructure that might be more supportive, and think about more supportive customer service types of activities. In other cases, you do want to engage in these activities, but you may want to do this together with a partner, right? If you do things together with a partner, there's this benefit that you might actually learn from your partner, and at some point you might become independent, you might cease the alliance, and you might be able to independently continue with this activity, which is the key benefit of many sorts of alliances and joint ventures. In other cases, your alliance or joint venture partner may not want to teach you the activity because they may not want you to become independent, because this might of course cause the risk for your partner that you're going to be better than your partner at some point in that particular activity. So then you and your partner may become complements, not working on the same thing, and so not engaging in knowledge spillover, but still helping each other by aiding each other in those activities that the other partner is not really able to successfully execute. So having said that, if you acquire or if you possess distinctive resource and capabilities and the right workforce, of course, for these capabilities and resource to work optimally, you need to structure the organization in a proper manner. And an organizational structure can, of course, look like, and function in many different ways. An organizational structure can be structured in terms of functional areas. Think about marketing, operations, finance. You might say that, okay, I'm going to have a marketing unit, a finance unit, and people are working in these units, and eventually the end boss is the head of marketing, the head of finance, and these people directly communicate to the CEO. This is a very traditional way of working, a very standard way of working. Many companies still work like this. The disadvantage here is that, of course, functional areas are segregated, even though many activities require these functional areas to work with each other. Marketing has to work oftentimes with operations, and operations perhaps with the R&D or innovation unit, and so on. And so if you have this issue, this dilemma, that you don't want to really segregate your company in terms of functional areas, then you may want to think about the multidivisional business. So this basically means that you're going to structure your organization based on divisions, which can be product divisions, service divisions, but it can also, for example, be a geographical division. Think about the division that's responsible for Southeast Asia, or think about the division that's responsible for smartphones. This way, you're not just going to segregate functional areas, they are going to actually intensively work with each other, because them working with each other is going to lead to the success of the division. And so one functional area's performance will not go at the cost of this other functional area. Then there's also the matrix structure, which is actually very interesting, because the matrix structure is going to blend functional areas and divisional areas with each other. You, as let's say the head of a certain matrix unit, might have many different types of managers to whom you have to report. You might have to report at the same time to the head of marketing, to the head of Southeast Asia, for example, but at the same time also to the head of the steel division, because your activity might cut through all of those business units. And this is actually more of a contemporary way of working, because many activities actually require this type of a blended way of working. Then there are also these new forms of organizing that are very interesting. These are more forms of self-managing. Think about agile organizations, or organizations that are scrumming. Think about holacracy. These are all these new forms of organizing that have basically the same thing in common, being that they want to move to this model of self-managing. Less authorities, less managers. You want to have the organization be more horizontal, to become more fast, to become more efficient, less bureaucratic, and hopefully also with this more effective. And so this is basically abandoning this traditional waterfall type of structure, where there's this top-down structure where the manager is saying what you need to do and that people are basically going to do it. Rather, this way of working where you abandon managers, where you're going to organize based on teams, based on groups, based on roles, and basically you're going to engage in the self-managing way of working through a process of coordination, planning, working, and eventually, of course, reflecting on what happened, and then you start again from the start. So it's actually this iterative and hopefully facilitative cycle. So in organizational structuring, as said, authority is always an important topic, and that's of course also where these self-managing teams came from. Here, of course, is this very extreme form of decentralization. Teams, groups are actually at the center of the organization. Managers become less important. But of course, at the very fundament of this is the question of how decentral should you be, and so how much authority should you actually delegate to lower levels, and do I actually want a team-based, group-based working where there are absolutely no managers anymore approximately, and basically the CEO is just the only manager in the company? I'm of course exaggerating now, but that's an important question. Are you going to be a more central organization where you have a lot of managers at the top, but other than that people are just reporting to them, or are you going to have this decentral organization where you have a lot of operational managers, a lot of middle managers that are also actually going to be very powerful? And so the benefit of decentralization can be that you can be faster as an organization, decisions can be more informed, and of course decisions can be made by people who are more competent to make that decision, because decentralization means that people that are going to make the decision are also people that are closer to the action, right? The actual people who are going to carry out the work are quite far away from the CEO, and so this oftentimes a reason why organizations want to become more decentral. So if something is going to happen, if an employee has to do something, should the CEO really make that decision, or is an operational manager better able to make that decision because she or he is closer to this employee? And decentralization actually supports the latter, saying that the operational manager should make that decision. So decentralization, of course, becomes more beneficial if you are a larger organization, if it becomes more difficult for the central manager to oversee everything. But if you are a smaller organization, then decentralization might actually lead to a lot of conflict of interest. Operational managers and middle managers might actually lead to extra layers that you may actually not need, and so the employee might want to directly talk to the CEO, and so on. So in going for centralization or decentralization, simply you have to weigh the advantages and disadvantages to come to eventually what decision is best. And so decentralization works well, again, as said, if you have this big organization, but also of course you need to assign the right people and you need to trust them. If you are a big company and you have a lot of middle managers and operational managers, you cannot check all of them day in, day out. You need to have checks and balances, and so monitoring and control is important, but you cannot check everybody every day, every second. And so you need to have the right people in place, you need to trust them, and you need to make sure that they're going to do the right thing even when you're not able to check on them, and even when you can, sometimes you shouldn't, because you simply trust that they will do the right thing. So part of the organizational structure is of course also collaboration. We also already talked about this a little bit, alliances and joint ventures. We talked a bit in terms of how to acquire the right resource and capabilities, but basically collaboration boils down to deciding about whether you want to organize your company around doing all of the things yourself, right? And this requires a particular organizational structure. But if you don't want to do everything yourself, and if you want to go forward with a lot of alliances, with joint ventures, then this requires a different organizational structure. But if you also decide to not do everything yourself, if you decide to others let do things of your organization, through, for example, outsourcing, then of course this also requires a different type of organizational structure, one that has many more contracts, one that has much more coordination, and one that of course has proper communication systems in place alongside all of the agreements that you make to have this outsourcing work. Same thing actually also counts for alliances and joint ventures. So once you have a structure in place that you think is working out, then of course you need to make sure that the resources that you have, that you're allocating this to the right activities, particularly so to the right strategic activities. Resources are scarce. You don't have endless amount of resources. And because you don't have those, you need to make sure that resources go to the right activities that of course in the best way possible support your strategy. And this is basically what opportunity cost of course is, in essence, there are multiple opportunities, and if you choose one, you cannot choose the other one, which is the opportunity cost. So you need to make sure that you leverage the best opportunity. So organizational structure, strategic activities, all of this should be supported through the right policies and the right procedures. You cannot each and every time come up with new directives and figure out things on the spot. If you have the right policies and procedures in place, of course this will lead to consistency. This will give people guidance. When they cannot find you, when they cannot talk to you, they can fall back on these policies and procedures. And of course, it will also promote the right working climate, because when people look at these policies and procedures, they will understand how they actually should be working. And this, of course, is going to help them understand what type of company the company actually wants to be. So whatever you do, regardless of how you're actually filling in the boxes that I've just laid out for you, you should always try to improve the way you do things. And of course, at the fundament of this lies continuous improvement of processes and activities. So continuous improvement is, over the course of time, being done in different ways. You can think about total quality management, where you want to manage the total quality of your business. All departments at once, in whatever they do, they should be coordinated and they should work with each other and be synergetic to the extent that the total quality is increasing. So if the finance department does better, but this goes at the cost of operations, then that's not the improvement of total quality. Every department is not per se required to work better. What's important is that the total quality of all departments all together, in the end, as the end, let's say, of a summation, work better. And that's what total quality management tries to ensure. Striving for perfection is important here, not just having this agreeable standard. But no, you want to go for perfection, and this, of course, you're trying to do through daily steps. And this is, in the end, what Kaizen entails, which is, of course, the Japanese word for ensuring that you're able to get perfection through day in, day out, improving a little bit. Another way of getting continuous improvement and making sure that your company improves over the course of time is Six Sigma. So basically what this boils down to is that you should make sure that producing defects is reduced to a certain number. You don't want to have too many defects, and actually Six Sigma has a very specific number for this, and that number you should not pass. Defects, variations should be minimized. And so Six Sigma as a way of continuously improving the business thinks that, because all work is a process, and because all processes have a certain level of variability, and because all processes generate data, if you look at this data, you will understand the processes, you will understand the variability, and through this you'll be able to reduce the amount of defects in whatever you're doing. So this is good, of course. You don't want to have too much variability that is going to lead to defects. But the problem with this is that innovation, in its essence, is something that generates a variability, and sometimes this will increase the amount of defects, but the right innovations, of course, can also make sure that you are going to come out with the next big thing and that you're going to revolutionize an industry or even set up this new industry. So the problem with Six Sigma is sometimes that it goes at the cost of innovativeness, because people focus on reducing variability, on reducing defects, and sometimes with that take away the innovative spirit of the organization. So at this point, having talked about continuous improvement, perhaps we should talk about the difference between continuous improvement on the one side and business process reengineering on the other side. So business process reengineering goes beyond continuous improvement, in the sense that business process reengineering is there for big changes, right? You may want to leapfrog others, or you may want to solve a part of your company that's broken. But with continuous improvement, you can do this always. You always want to improve what you're doing. Even if you're number one in the industry, things can always be better, and that's what continuous improvement is about. So we're talking here about, of course, superior strategy execution, and one thing that's the backbone of superior strategy execution is proper information and operation systems. So what this boils down to is that if you want to execute strategy in a superior manner, if you want to get competitive advantage, you need to all the time gather and analyze various types of data that are then going to feed into your decisions. You need customer data, you need operations data, employee data, collaborator data, so with whom you're collaborating, how it is working out, and whether you should continue with it. You need to have financial performance data, so your profits, return on equity, earnings per share, whatever. And of course, all of this data you're in need of to optimize, to fix, to change, and to improve your business. So if the organization at this stage has the structure and processes in place that you want, it still needs to make sure that the people that we talked about at the beginning of this video are actually going to work hard and they're going to work well. And if you want to ensure this, then the key is, of course, that you have the right reward and incentive systems in place. This is essential. If you want people to be committed, if you want people to be motivated, then of course you need to compensate them. And this you can do in two general ways. One is, of course, in a monetary manner. You can give them bonuses that are linked to their performance. You can give incentives not just to managers but to all workers, and this way, of course, motivate and stimulate everybody. You need to be objective in doing this. You need to be fair, and whatever you're actually incentivizing, it needs to, of course, be related to activities that are related to your strategy. So targets that you want people to reach and to get, these targets should again be related to the strategy, but these targets should also affect people themselves so that they're actually doing things that are going to either hurt them or help them. And if they do good, if it helps them, and if monetarily also comes back to them, then people, of course, are going to work harder and work better. And finally, if you're going to give people a bonus, if you're going to give them actually monetary reward, then you should make sure that the time in between their performance and their pay is not too long, because then of course people might not see the link and they may not want to actually work as hard as you hoped for. Then there are, of course, also non-monetary benefits. Think about perks and fringe benefit packages. Think about, for example, social security, which is actually nowadays a must, but you can also think about a car from the business, right, and that you give them as an additional perk. You can think about more holidays if you really perform well as again a gift. You can think about vouchers, about checks, whatever. But you can also think about something more related to work. So you can think about that you have this policy in place where you're going to promote people from within unless something extraordinary happens. And this way people are actually going to be motivated to work hard because they, of course, want to make sure of this promotion option and get to the higher ranks of the business. You also may want to actually listen to what your employees have to say, and this will, of course, make them feel that they are actually valued and listened to, and this will, of course, lead to this higher level of engagement of your employees. Of course, key here is also that you are respectful towards everybody and that you have this environment where people actually feel comfortable, and this way, of course, this will enhance their productivity. You also may want to share information about what's going well, what's not going well, and this way, again, lead to this vibe where people are saying, hey, we're actually part of this company shares information with us and sees us as family and not just as this other end of this transactional relationship. Finally, a work environment has an intangible part, but also a tangible part. Where people sit, where people walk, and what people see should also be attractive for people to actually be productive. So, structure, processes, policies, reward systems, we talked about this, and they're all important, but one thing that's also super important is, of course, the working culture. A culture is a work climate that's shaped by values, by beliefs, by principles, and a culture influences traditions, it influences work practices, it influences the way in which you operate. And so cultures are essential to any company that wants to work well. Culture should be, of course, supportive of high performance. So people should be encouraged and supported and facilitated to actually work well. And there should be the system in place, be it through monetary incentives, non-monetary incentives, through leadership, that's actually going to ensure that people are really performing and that they're not being distantiated for doing this, and that they're actually appreciated for doing this. And of course, cultures should be adaptive and not change resistant. Many companies are sadly stuck in their past. What they did in the past, they keep on doing, and that's not a good way of doing. And so a culture should actually be flexible. As time passes by, it should be able to adopt those practices, those beliefs, those principles that are actually going to benefit the organization. So sadly, there are many unhealthy cultures, and this people should eradicate. They should kick out of their business because it's a big problem. Think about cultures that are very politicized and that people don't feel comfortable in being in, because there might be different political views, there might be different opinions, there might be different beliefs, and so on. And you may want to have this environment where politics is not so important, also not in terms of, for example, sabotaging each other, also not, for example, in terms of this unhealthy type of competition, because everybody may want to get this promotion that we just talked about. So politics, be it external politics in terms of the country in which you're in, be it in terms of politics in terms of the company that you're in, can be very, very unhealthy. Change resistance, we talked about. Certain cultures are really change resistant, and with that they last for tens of years, and with that they hurt the company in changing and adapting and in staying contemporary. Other cultures are very inward looking, so they don't learn from the outside, they don't search, they don't adopt, they don't benchmark, and this way others can easily bypass them, others can easily leapfrog them. Then certain cultures are very unethical, very driven by egos, very driven by greed, and again, these types of cultures you don't want. And then you can have certain companies where you have many subcultures that might not be compatible, and that might actually lead to silos of people that are not talking, that are not working with each other, and this is also a very unhealthy type of a culture. So at that point, of course, you need to change these ineffective cultures. So how can you do that? You start, of course, with a compelling case. Why should the culture be changed? Of course, for this, you need to have the right amount of support. People should actually embrace your change initiative. When you have this change initiative, firstly, you're going to try to replace key people. People who were the cause for these bad cultures, they need to be kicked out of the organization, and you need to have the right people installed. And also, if you have people at the lower ranks of your organization that are actually the right people to be at the higher level of the organization, you're going to promote them. Then, you're going to look outside of your organization. Who can actually help me change my culture? And these people you're going to appoint within your company to again facilitate this cultural change. Then of course you're going to screen people in your new hiring processes so that they're in line with your new culture, and of course you're going to make sure that you have trainings and programs in place within your organization that are going to teach people what this new culture is going to be all about. Your compensation and your incentive structures are also going to be in line with this new culture. People are going to get incentivized and going to get bonuses if they work in line with this culture. And of course, policies, procedures are going to be in line with this new culture. People, when they're looking up things, when they're asking, how should I do this, how should I do that, should get an answer, should get a response, or should see a document that's again in line with the new culture to make sure that the company from top to bottom and from bottom to top is changing in line with this culture. Symbolism is also very important. Managers, leaders should of course lead by example, so they should actually show what's the right way of working. So a final point on strategy execution is that strategy has to be executed, and of course key here is of course that you also lead this strategy execution as a leader. So you need to make sure that everything goes well on top of leading as an example. And so this means that you should of course not only trust, and you should not only do, but should also monitor things going well, and you should also facilitate it, and you should also support it. And at the center of this, of course, is that you should all the time have this constructive pressure and this constructive actions, these constructive policies, procedures in place, so that you ensure that people are actually going to do what you're hoping that they're doing, that they're going to do, and that you actually make sure that people are really part of this, superior way of strategy execution. So a leader should treat people well. Leaders should provide stretch goals, so right, excite people, challenge people to keep on being interested of being part of that company. A leader should support innovation, should support continuous improvement, should motivate workers with the right policies, with the right incentives, with the right bonuses, but should also celebrate successes and make people feel being part of an organization. And of course, the flip side is that if things go astray, then the leader should take responsibility, the leader should engage in business reengineering, and of course the leader should also change the culture in such a way that again the company is prepared for the next 10 to 20 years. I hope you enjoyed the video. If so, please don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe buttons. I wish you all the best in the world and hope to see you again anytime soon. Take care.